Hi, my name is Nicole and this is my cultural plunge presentation for Edu1 DLC. For this assignment, I've been asked to interview someone culturally or socially different to myself and reflect on my understanding and awareness of diversity and the shaping of identity through our educational experiences. I chose to speak with my friend and colleague Ken, who is 10 years younger than me and had a very different schooling experience to myself. I went to a small local suburban public primary school in Melbourne and then the high school next door. Ken, however, moved around quite a lot and went to private Catholic schools in both Queensland and WA. Ken also struggled with identity as a Catholic school student due to coming out late in high school. I always had a fairly relaxed view of education as an early student. Always a fairly good student, but never had to work very hard at it. Nobody in my family had attended university and we were working class background. I was encouraged, definitely, and becoming a good student or one of the smart kids began to build a part of my identity as a student. At the same time, I was dealing with a fair amount of bullying. It seemed the two seemed to go together a little. As a result, in high school, my motivation and drive went a little awry, and I certainly didn't push myself to achieve the way I could have. Ken echoes some of these sentiments of my high school years of being an interested, quick-witted and smart student who was not motivated towards academic excellence. This frustrated our teachers, I'm sure, although Ken's experience seems to have been a little more intense than mine. Teachers that know how to harness this loose energy and maintain focus with their students are so important for students such as us, particularly at such a key time for adolescence, the development of the concept of self and the identity we wish to create and present to society. But in such a small school, it was difficult to change anything. Ken speaks of a drama teacher that he had while in Mackay. This teacher was previously experienced in the performance acting field outside of working in schools, an area that Ken had an interest in, and this particular teacher, Ken believes, helped him softly guide him to acceptance of self within what was otherwise a very rigid and non-inclusive school setting. Being Catholic and homosexual do not normally go together, and Ken was subject to discrimination on this point. He talks about being punished more harshly when caught kissing his boyfriend at school, whereas girls and boys kissing were just told to stop. In this case, the school called the parents and all, causing a large family issue for the other student. There was no consideration, no acceptance of diversity or cultural norms other than their own, set from religious beliefs. Had this happened at my school, being not religious, I doubt the teachers would have done anything other than to just tell them to cut it out. For myself, this highlights the prevalence of outdated practices which I had thought, perhaps naively, had died out. Imagine the ramifications on both of these students' identities for being so harshly punished for something that they, and many of us now, accept as normal. They are told that their self-identity is wrong by these actions, and likely verbally by the teachers at the time. Knight discusses the way that students' identities are not constructed purely by osmosis, and that students actively construct their own identities by making sense of the world they live in and the dominant culture or subcultures that they are exposed to. He also discusses the importance of the teacher understanding the issue and removing personal judgments or preconceptions of heteronormativity. Hearing firsthand how this segregates students of a different religion, belief or lifestyle choice prompts me to think even more deeply about how my actions both now and in the future could have long-lasting impacts on my students. No matter my own beliefs, I choose to act in a way that supports the healthy building of self-identity of my future students and any others that I may affect along the way. Howard and Woolcock, 2015, also speak of the importance for inclusive policies across the education system. Kean moved quite a lot, and even though I did not, we both struggled with inclusion and belonging within our respective communities. Had we been more involved in our communities or fostered better relationships with teachers earlier, I think we would have both achieved more academically. Kean speaks of school of not just being his thing, but not really of any supportive or standout teachers other than the previously mentioned drama teacher. He also raised the issue of standardised curriculum and testing, even mentioning the picture that was on one of our lecture slides for both this subject and Indigenous Studies, the climbing tree test. which really strikes a chord with me as well. This was a big issue for him in the private school system, with them trying to maintain status and scores, while for me it wasn't really a big deal. I was kind of just floating along, especially throughout high school, with no teachers or parents really giving me any push in a particular direction, and I felt a bit lost in that way, and I feel this is what I needed. The issue of standardised testing raises issues with equity within the education system, as all students learn differently and have different strengths in different areas. For example, Howard Gardner has developed a theory which details 8 separate types of intelligence, and our testing does not reflect that. One approach and one test is not going to work for everyone, and this is reflected in the national debate around NAPLAN. Social justice involves an adjusted approach and support for those that have diverse needs or interests. The concept of social justice is not one that I have put much thought in prior to this subject, instead thinking that maybe when I was in high school that other students hold others back in class, it's behaviour based, or they just don't work hard enough. My attitude towards this is slowly changing the more I understand the concept and the different ways in which people are able to learn. I now recognise and understand more deeply things such as community classrooms and social constructivist teaching methods. Another issue raised was the difference between genders. In Keen's experience, girls were more likely or more harshly punished for their behaviour, and it's again a traditional and outdated view, particularly being in a Catholic school again. Myself being in a public school of sort of middle SES, it wasn't so much of a big deal. We didn't really get treated too differently. But think back to when girls studied sewing and home ec and boys did woodwork or maths. So these kinds of ideals are still there, and I did still see them in some of my teachers. And these still affect student experience. NIPE again discusses this with the construction of gender as well as stereotypes affecting student identity. Detrimental terms continue to hegemonise cultural stereotypes and have implications for identity development. This could affect education in the way that the school jock may be teased for being a nerd if he speaks up in class or does well on a test, or the same for children of a low SES background whose parents may not be supportive due to their own prior experiences. I was definitely bullied for being a nerd, and this deterred me from owning my achievements or trying harder. I could have done much, much better than I did, but I was just put off socially to do that. So looking back now, it's easy to see where my attitude affected where some of my adult life has gone. Even to get into this course, I had to take the pathway course, as I didn't do VCE maths. Even now, 14 years later, it still matters. When you think about this kind of thing, it's like thinking about sending a letter to your younger self to try and explain why some things are important or why they're not going to be important, but it just takes time and experience. After all, I'm here now and I'm doing it now, and that's what matters. In conclusion, this task has asked me to think deeply about the way schools, key role models and experiences can model behaviour and self-concept, and how pertinent this is at a crucial time for developing self-identity. I will come across many more ways in which community, belonging and inclusion can affect an individual's education journey and attitude in the future. I will be prompted to think carefully, critically and reflectively about mine and others' behaviours and the systems that I work within to foster good relationships, avoid stereotyping and normalising my students, and give them every opportunity to explore their identity and shine in a safe way. Thank you for listening. This has been my presentation. Hope you've enjoyed it.